Good morning, everybody. This is a live severe weather briefing as High Plains insanity is starting early this year across the central and southern High Plains. Looks like eastern Colorado into northwestern Kansas is going to be the threat today for monster supercell storms. There was one yesterday that passed from north to south just to the east of Goodland, Kansas, that had some incredible scenes. After sunset, a high base supercell storm. You can see all the structure within that storm. So a lot of the northwesterly flow bandits that were out there storm chasing, and I should have been out there storm chasing as well, but we are out at my mom's place, rendezvoused with Gizmo, and we are about to head west very soon to get back into the game here, storm chasing across the southern High Plains. My mom and I are thinking about going after the cicadas here to capture their emergence. Then I'm going to be heading west to chase multiple days across the Texas Panhandle. But today there definitely is a threat of very large hail, and the Storm Prediction Center has upgraded to a slight risk. And in fact, today and tomorrow have been upgraded to slight risks. And here you can see that threat for significant hail up to gorilla size today. Looks like storms could fire near the Lyman area and then track east-southeast toward the Syracuse, Kansas area. I can see that track. Some of the models are showing a little bit further north of a track to the north of the I-70 corridor, tracking southeast through northwestern Kansas near the Kansas-Nebraska border. Definitely looks like an incredible chase day today, and I do think that there is a threat of an isolated tornado as well. I'm going to be spending some final time with my nephew today, but I will be watching this event unfold very closely, and then we're going to be heading west in Dominator 4 shortly to chase multiple days of High Plains insanity. That did kind of sneak up on us a little bit here, but the Storm Prediction Center again has upgraded to a slight risk today, and we are definitely going to be hitting the road shortly to intercept this storm. It is the peak tornado season. It is May right now, and even with this pattern here, with this ridging aloft and a bit of some northwesterly flow, it does look like a pretty substantial severe weather day, all triggered by this jet streak that's riding atop this ridge. So this is normally like more of a June type of a pattern here, where you get that easterly upslope at the low levels. You get a jet streak here of 30 to 40 knots. That creates a lot of bulk shear across this target area, much greater than the 30 knots needed between 0 and 6 kilometers for those supercell storms. And a lot of times these southeasterly movers can generate their own storm relative low-level shear as they turn into that weak low-level jet. And these setups here across the High Plains also have a lot of directional shear. So this is at 21Z at 3 p.m. Mountain Time, and you can see this jet streak rounding the bend here in northeastern Colorado, moving in across the target area. It looks like the nose of that jet, according to the 3-kilometer NAM, moves into northeastern Colorado here, eventually to northwestern Kansas as well. And right along the nose of that and to the south of that jet streak are where these storms are going to fire up. But this is at 21Z. At 22Z, you can see that jet streak starting to move into northwestern Kansas there. And quite a big hunk of instability here and 0 to 3 kilometer shear across this area. And there you can see that streamer. I usually use the 0 to 3 kilometer indices for the High Plains because a lot of times you'll get easterly winds up to about 1 or 2 kilometers, and then they flip around to westerly. So your traditional 0 to 1 kilometer indices, even the 0 to 500 meter indices that we use in the Mid-South and Tornado Alley, just aren't as effective at capturing the true magnitude of the wind shear across the southern High Plains. And so that's why I use the 0 to 3 kilometer indices anywhere in the High Plains, central, northern High Plains, all the way down to the Mexico border here. It depends on the elevation. That's why you get more of these High Plains type of soundings. And here you can see the plume of the overlay between surface-based CAPE and 0 to 3 kilometer storm relative helicity. That is the 0 to 3 kilometer EHI. And the key to chasing these setups is to track these plumes of moisture and wind shear all the way up toward the terrain. So I'm going through the southern High Plains, I'm going up in elevation, and then once you finally meet that higher terrain, that's where those supercell storms will initiate, and then they track into these streamers. The 3-kilometer NAM is a little bit further south with this streamer, more of a Lyman to Syracuse, Kansas type of an area, whereas the HRRR is a bit further north with that streamer. and a lot weaker according to the NAM, and that's because the HRRR is notorious for overmixing these environments up at high altitude, and that's why it takes until 1Z to really realize this pipe of surface-based CAPE at 0 to 3 kilometer shear into that instability. So that's why I like to use these 3 kilometer, the high resolution NAM. It's able to resolve the terrain features. It doesn't have that overmixing problem. I use these short range models to look at environments more than the positioning of the exact composite reflectivity forecast. I know a lot of storm chasers will share with me the latest HRRR composite reflectivity, but I really like to use these models to assess the environment that these storms are going to be moving into. And it looks like these storms are going to be developing just to the southeast of Denver off that higher terrain by about 3 or 4 p.m. And then they're going to track into this plume of 0 to 3 kilometer surface-based instability and 0 to 3 kilometer shear. Surface-based instability co-located with that shear. Great tool to use is the Energy Helicity Index. Let's look at the raw shear contributing to that. And by 21Z, you have in excess of 200 meters squared per second squared 0 to 3 kilometer shear. And that goes all the way up to the higher terrain here in the Rockies. You've got that jet streak here, mid-level jet streak at 500 millibars across northern Colorado by 21Z, starting to initiate storms on its southern gradient. And maybe on the leading nose here, a little closer to the deeper moisture into northwestern Kansas. If you can get a storm going out there, a little bit closer to these low 50s dew points, and then as you get closer to 0Z, there you'll see a reinvigoration of these deeper dew points streaming into western Kansas here, low to mid 50s dew points, 50 dew point even all the way into east central Colorado. That's more than sufficient for an isolated tornado threat out there. You're going to be talking about 25-degree temperature dew point spreads. That's at 0Z. So let's look at sounding here near Kit Carson or so. You're going to be talking about 25-degree dew point spreads. With the green number here, that's your dew point in the low 50s. Your temperature there into the mid 70s. And look at the easterly winds here at the low levels. I know you can't see this very well, so let me take a frame grab of this so I can annotate this. And then we'll break down this sounding in Colorado. But today is definitely going to be a marginal moisture day across eastern Colorado into northwestern Kansas, but very large hail is going to be likely with that strong instability in that hail growth zone. Also some very strong shear up in this environment. You do have some quite favorable surface-based CAPE here. You've got an excess of 2,000 all the way down into west central Kansas with a streamer of 1,500 almost all the way up to Denver. So you've had snow a lot of time during this early spring across Denver. Now today you're going to have instability, surface-based instability with CAPEs in excess of 1,000 streaming up toward the Denver area by 21Z, 3 p.m. Mountain Time, just when these storms are going to be firing off the higher terrain, maybe even off the Palmer Divide there near Denver, probably a little bit east of that higher terrain though, and then they'll pass into this 0 to 3 kilometer shear and moisture plume surging west across the high plains from the deeper moisture across western Kansas. It's also possible could get a storm down near the Black Mesa area, down into the western Oklahoma Panhandle. That could track into the Oklahoma Panhandle and into the northern Texas Panhandle by evening. Dew points down there will be at about the low to mid 50s. So you're still going to be talking about 25 degree dew point spreads, that is for sure. But that next trough is going to eject Sunday and especially Monday into Tuesday across Texas. And I do think that Monday is going to be a pretty substantial tornado day across the southeastern Texas Panhandle, maybe into southwestern Oklahoma, northwest Texas, those traditional areas that we've been chasing quite a bit so far this season. I do think Monday is going to be a big tornado day out there. Tuesday looks like a central Texas type day. Sunday, probably some high plains insanity across the Texas Panhandle. Tomorrow, likely some high plains insanity as well across the Oklahoma Panhandle and the northern Texas Panhandle. But look at the difference in the dew points here between the 3 kilometer NAM and the HRRR. And the HRRR definitely is overmixing once again, especially across this higher terrain. By 21Z, the HRRR has dew points in the 30s up there, up near Denver. But still, it probably initiates storms up there. A lot of times the HRRR is right for the wrong reasons, and it still has a storm up there initiating off the higher terrain in east central Colorado, showing you where it's going to happen at least. But again, with dew points in the 30s, that's why it kind of has this weakening convective mode across eastern Colorado into the target area. We're 3 kilometer NAM people in high plains insanity season. Definitely shows these supercell storms in eastern Colorado, dropping very large hail. Right now, though, most of the convective allowing models, at least the 6Z runs, have a lack of convection across the significant hail zone, the hatched area from northeastern Colorado into northwestern Kansas. I wouldn't be surprised if it does happen just a little bit further south, kind of along the southern periphery of that hatch area, and also some storms across the northern Texas Panhandle, 6 p.m. to 0Z. Looking at a sounding out ahead of that storm that could be just north of the Amarillo area. You do have these big looping hodographs out there, but you have dew point spreads in excess of 25 degrees there in the central Texas Panhandle. You can get Panhandle magic with 25-degree dew point spreads out there. I've seen it happen. Tornadoes in the Texas Panhandle, but today those temperature dew point spreads are just going to be a little bit too great. A lot of 3-kilometer capes, steep lapse rates, a lot of evaporational cooling with these near inverted V soundings as that dew point line and the temperature line diverge below cloud base there. But you do have some decent hodographs favoring some organized storm structures down there, possible supercell storms across the northern Texas Panhandle. So now let me pull up this sounding so I can annotate this really quick. This is the sounding that we just took out of that prime location in east central Colorado using the 3-kilometer NAM. And I want to show you what these high plains soundings will look like and how they can be just a little bit different too than much of what we've been forecasting so far. So here is the sounding, 3-kilometer NAM sounding out of east central Colorado. We believe the thermodynamics a little bit more here, but look at how these low-level easterlies, see how these are easterly winds all the way up above a kilometer, up to about 2 kilometers here, and then they flip around to westerly. So this is a textbook high plains shear profile. It's a relatively modest one. They can get a lot stronger, especially as you get toward peak high plains insanity season, or if you have a bit of a trough that's ejecting over that can help to strengthen these low-level easterlies in the post-frontal environment and also strengthen these mid-level winds, so you strengthen the bulk shear within that profile. But this one in east central Colorado, this is the dew point line here. This is the temperature line, and notice how they diverge a bit below cloud base, leading to about a 25-degree temperature dew point spread. That's about the limit. About a marginal temperature dew point spread there for a tornado threat. But as you get a little bit closer to sunset, closer to 0Z, at about 7 p.m. mountain time out there, you can bring this line a little bit back, and then you bring this moisture line a little bit up, and that can lead to a temperature dew point spread a little bit closer to 20 degrees, 23, 24, but 25 is doable to get an isolated tornado out there, and you get a lot of cape, an abundance of cape within this layer up here. The parcel ascent temperature, the red line is the environmental temperature. So as these parcels are rising, they're warmer than the surrounding environment, and they keep on rising all the way up to the equilibrium level there at the top of the atmosphere. And then you get the northwest flow up there at the mid and high levels of the troposphere, and accelerating up above 50 knots up there, 300 millibars. And that's bringing all of these winds down to this portion of the hodograph, more than sufficient for evacuating that rain and hail from the mesocyclone. And even though you do have relatively weak low-level winds there, even weaker than 10 knots, you get a lot of directional shear, and that northwesterly flow brings your storm motion down here. So that creates quite a bit of storm relative helicity between the storm motion vector and that hodograph curve across this region of the hodograph. And that's why these northwesterly flow events are so effective at generating their own wind shear out there. You got to look at it in terms of a storm relative sense. So when you bring your storm motion way down here, when it's moving south at about 20 knots. Really, your storm relative southerly wind at this level is about a 30 knot southerly wind. So that's big inflow, storm relative inflow into this storm. Your 1 kilometer wind is out here, south-southeast, a pretty weak wind. And then your 2 kilometer wind flips around to a westerly direction. And that's how you get these curved photographs in the high plains. North to south, all the way up into Canada, Alberta, Saskatchewan, those locations, you get a lot of high plains insanity. Down through eastern Wyoming, eastern Montana, into the western Dakotas, down through eastern Colorado, even into western Kansas, near that Colorado-Kansas border, all the way down into the Texas Panhandle, eastern New Mexico, down into northeastern Mexico, just to the east of the mountains. Let's go back now to the forecast models and break down some of these other setups. So I think today might even be a little bit bigger of a day than tomorrow. You've got that jet streak that's rounding northern Colorado, moving right into that target area. There's that jet streak today. This is the trough in California that is going to close off over the southwestern U.S. and eventually eject across the southern high plains on Monday and Tuesday. Saturday, you start to get some ridging across the high plains, and sometimes you can still get severe storms in there. You usually get a little bit of some weaker upper level winds, more of a multicellular event across the southern high plains. Most of your stronger flow is still riding the top of that ridge across the central plains, a little bit further north into Nebraska. So I do think that Saturday is going to be a bit of an off day. This will give us time to go look for cicadas across that cicada hatching zone. The 17-year cicadas emerging across eastern Tennessee already in those low-lying areas like Knoxville. The Cumberland Plateau does not yet have those cicadas emerging. And then I think Sunday is going to be a pretty substantial day. Some slightly stronger westerly flow starting to emanate here, likely at MCS, a little shortwave in between these two, probably due to a convective complex that forms on Saturday night there. So that could clean out the warm sector just a little bit on Sunday, but then setting the stage for Monday. Look at this upper level system diving south through the southwestern U.S. This is going to eject across the southern high plains on Monday. And this is the day that I think is going to be quite substantial. Look at this stronger flow rounding the base of this cutoff upper level low. The main jet way up into Canada here, but you're starting to already see some height falls there over the northeastern Pacific, setting the stage for our active end of May to tornado season. But this is the system that's going to eject on Monday, and we'll have to go back to the operational GFS model here. But you can start to see this stronger flow move out over the Texas Panhandle on Monday evening. This is going to be a big day out there across Texas, and it looks like your traditional work off the Cap Rock there in the southern Texas Panhandle, maybe even track those storms through the Red River Valley into southwestern Oklahoma there. Very generally looking at your 0 to 3 kilometer EHI. You can see your classic pipe here into the eastern Texas Panhandle through southwestern Oklahoma. Expanding there as you go to 0Z as that low-level jet increases a bit. So it looks like a Panhandle Magic Day on Monday, and it looks like a pretty substantial severe weather event. And then on the next day as that trough ejects, looks like more of a central Texas event. Probably a complex of storms will develop Monday evening across the southern high plains, which could definitely focus or pinch off that warm sector just a little bit into central Texas. But a stronger low-level jet develops as well as this system ejects across central Texas. You've got your 1 kilometer winds in excess of about 30 knots there around the I-35 corridor and a little bit further west where you get that greater instability. And then here is this big-time trough starting to organize over the northeastern Pacific. And it looks like this is going to cause Tornado Alley to really wake up. Look at this thing. This is setting the stage for a big-time pattern shift the last 10 days of May. I think we're going to see some pretty substantial severe weather here eventually. And the models aren't very good in the long range, so you just have to look for these little clues when you're looking this far out. And you can see this, it takes a while to happen, but you definitely do get the development of a large-scale trough across the western U.S. at about May 25th or so. I think that's when it's going to come alive, especially. Look at this in the Central Plains here. Looks like Nebraska, Kansas, all these locations. Tornado Alley is going to come alive about the last week of May. And again, you have the tendency for these bowling ball systems to lift up towards south central Canada. You don't want to get too focused on the exact shape of that trough ejection across the western U.S., but it does look like this also refocuses the jet stream a bit further south as we go through the end of May into early June, possibly setting the stage for a pretty active high plains season as well as we go through June, but that's all just speculation at this point. And in fact, really anything outside of about 3 days is very speculative in nature, given how these models are performing these days. But it does look like starting at about May 25th, things are going to get active again. Here is this egg-shaped trough ejection on Tuesday, which should bring that stronger flow down through central Texas on Tuesday. But it does look like Monday is the big day. Sunday could be a decent day as well, as you get a little bit of an increase in that mid-level flow over the Texas Panhandle, over top those easterlies at the low levels. Some lee cyclogenesis here happening, which should bend those winds back to an easterly direction with time as you go through the day. See those easterly winds here across the Panhandles on Sunday. So I do think that Sunday could also be a Panhandle magic type of a day out there. Even though there is a likely complex of storms that's going to form on Saturday night. So we are going to have to look at the mesoscale every night before we break down those target areas. Nice plume of instability here into the southern Texas Panhandle on Sunday. Looks interesting. Eastern Texas Panhandle as well. Okay, look at the NAM. Has that dry line closer to the New Mexico-Texas border on Sunday. So I could see down there to the west of Lubbock being quite interesting. Just south of Lubbock, maybe playing off the Cap Rock down near the Post area on Sunday. And then Monday across the southern or central Texas Panhandle. And then Tuesday down into central Texas looks quite interesting. So thank you everybody for tuning in to my weather reports. This is the slight risk area today. May want to bring that slight risk just a little bit further south. And I can see this zone to the southeast of Denver, kind of right along that southern gradient of that slight risk, also being quite interesting there for a corridor of those supercells to turn southeast. Very large hail producers as well. So we've got that hatch area for gorilla hail there, northeastern Colorado into northwestern Kansas. That includes the I-70 corridor and some hailers down into the Texas Panhandle, but a little bit less in the way of upslope flow down there. A little bit more mixing down into the Oklahoma and Texas Panhandles. More multi-cell clusters down there evolving into the northern Texas Panhandle. So we'll keep an eye on those. But textbook high plains soundings, a little bit dry in the low levels, but still contributing to 2,500 CAPE there in eastern Colorado. A ton of CAPE within generating here in the large hail growth zone areas as well. Your 0 to 1 kilometer shear, quite low, but then your 0 to 3 kilometer shear, notice how it bulges up above 200, and that's why it's important to use these 0 to 3 kilometer shear indices when you're forecasting for the high plains north to south, because you usually get these easterly winds in the lowest 2 kilometers flipping around to westerly just above that, and that leads to some curved photographs. But the 0 to 1 kilometer shear indices and supercell indices that are based on 0 to 1 kilometer shear just don't quite capture that flip around in the southern high plains, which we naturally specialize in. We specialize in all severe weather modes: southern high plains, traditional tornado alley, deep south, all of it. We specialize in it. So thank you everybody for tuning in to my weather report this Friday morning. I'm going to be hanging out with my nephew today, probably for the last time during this peak storm season. And then we'll likely look for some cicadas tomorrow. And then Gizmo and I are going to be pointing the ship west for high plains insanity season. Well underway here. Never stop chasing.